MyFaction is returning this year with WWE 2K25, and I know just everybody is really excited about this. What's going on? I'm Jesse. Welcome to the Pro Wrestling Shoot. If you're new to the channel, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We got a lot of exclusive content dropping on this channel all throughout the season, as well as tons of giveaways and so much more. MyFaction was a mode last year that kept me engaged with WWE 2K24 because there was a lot of issues with the game in general. The Universe mode and GM mode didn't keep me invested long enough, and Showcase was pretty much a one and done, as well as the MyRise. And because we had so many issues with AI and all the other bugs throughout WWE 2K24, MyFaction was really the only thing that was delivering content all throughout the year. Though it came with tons of its own issues, especially with the high pricing for Persona cards and just the lack of grind for MyFaction points. MyFaction points turned into something that was few and far between, and so that kind of left a lot of players leaving feedback to the development team to hope for a better MyFaction mode come 2025. Things like an auction market or trade market were proposed, as well as bringing back briefcases just like they had in WWE 2K23. A couple of the things that kept players engaged with MyFaction was, of course, all the content drop within the live events, as well as the proving grounds. But in WWE 2K25, there are things that are going to be a little bit different, but still quite the same. For starters, Proving Grounds has now been replaced with a mode called World Tour, where now players can travel across the globe and compete in different matches. And the way it looks right now, it seems like the setup is pretty good. Shout out to WWE 2K for flying me out to Creator Fest in Orlando, Florida to get early hands-on access with WWE 2K25. And this year they actually had the MyFaction booth set up, so I was able to get into MyFaction and get a sneak peek of what we could expect for this year. So of course, the first mode I hopped in was the World Tour to check it out. We did end up playing a couple events throughout the World Tour. They already had live events set up, but we're not sure if these are the same live events that are coming day one of release for WWE 2K25, but I can only assume that these are the ones that we could expect. Within the live events, we did notice a couple of Persona cards already rolling out right at the start of the year, Sola Sokoa being one of them. Just like WWE 2K24, we got the Sheamus Persona card right off the bat as a gold card. But this year we are seeing multiple Persona cards being released right at the beginning. Scrolling through the Faction Wars, I didn't notice too much of a difference. There was only one tier that we had scrolled through and it was just a straight line. It wasn't a branching event, it was just a small Faction Wars lineup. But we also did not notice any new briefcases being added within MyFaction. So briefcases are not making a return for WWE 2K25. We also noticed that we didn't see any auction market or trade market involved with WWE 2K25 either. So it poses the question if the MyFaction points grind is going to be just as bad as last year. Going in and playing a couple of matches, we noticed that the MyFaction point count was very, very low. Just like playing the island, it didn't seem like enough payout reward to earn enough VC or even MyFaction points. Though this was an early build that we played on a dev kit, things could change come release, but I wouldn't hold my breath when it comes to grinding out MyFaction points, because MyFaction is just one of those modes that they want to keep the players engaged. They want to keep them grinding to earn certain Persona cards. My only hope is that Persona cards are much more attainable this year, because I know a lot of fans had an issue with this coming out of WWE 2K24. We're still going to be seeing a lot of the Mattel figures rolling out, as well as other Persona cards. Like I mentioned earlier, Sola Sokoa with the full-on suit is one of them, but also noticing that they've locked Booker T 01 again behind a Persona card in MyFaction. Though personally, I would have enjoyed a lot more if all of these Persona cards were released day one, regular roster, not as Persona cards, not in MyFaction, just a part of the roster. But now looking at this, it seems like we're going to be grinding out a lot more of the same from WWE 2K24. Not saying that they're not coming out with a lot more Persona cards that we didn't see last year, but we are seeing some similar ones going into WWE 2K25. My only hope for the points is that the reward is worth the grind this year, because last year I felt like it was nearly impossible. They wanted you to spend hours upon hours within this MyFaction mode grinding out cards, and with the island coming out and Universe being decent this year, as well as my GM being online, I just don't see me spending a lot of time within MyFaction mode this year. Though the mode did keep me busy last year, there is just not enough to offer when there are better things to play within the game. So I guess that's why Persona cards come into the mix. I'm hoping that the live events have tamed down a lot more. Hopefully we get a lot more of them, worth a lot more of MyFaction points. And hopefully the locker codes come out, help players to obtain a lot of these Persona cards. Because at the end of the day, I feel like that is what the majority of the player base that is coming into MyFaction nowadays is there to do. They just want the Persona cards. I don't think that they are in it for the fun of MyFaction. Some are, but not everybody. Personally, I enjoyed MyFaction a lot last year just because it gave me something to do within WWE 2K24, where other modes just completely lacked on. But this year, I was hoping for a significant change within MyFaction. Though I only got a few minutes in MyFaction to look around and kind of see what they have done differently this year, it didn't really seem like much has changed other than World Tour replacing Proving Grounds. But I will have to admit that World Tour looks a lot more interesting than the Proving Grounds selection in WWE 2K24. So I am looking forward to at least diving into World Tour and seeing what that's all about, and hopefully the grind is worth it. But at the end of the day, it is still not a fan favorite mode within WWE 2K for the majority of players. This is one of those microtransaction modes, and at the end of the day, people just don't like microtransaction modes. Personally, I'm not one to complain so much about the microtransactions. I just wish that it was more obtainable without paying a dime. So I still have high hopes that they're going to do the right thing and have MyFaction points become more obtainable than they were in WWE 2K24, thus allowing us to open more packs within the process. Because at the end of the day, the packs are what give you the MyFaction points. They're the ones that give you the Persona cards for the most part. And a lot of these things are collection rewards that people are going to have to grind out a lot. I do love the new UI setup in MyFaction this year, as well as the World Tour. It looks aesthetically pleasing. But at the end of the day, I'm not looking for aesthetics. I'm looking for something that I'm going to have fun in. And hopefully they fixed a lot of things. Like I said before, we didn't dive too much into the MyFaction this year. We're just giving you the first look of what to expect when it comes to MyFaction in WWE 2K25. Things that I can request for the future is just to add briefcases within this thing, because a lot of people love the briefcases. They loved obtaining more MyFaction points within the grind. That has got to be the key for the players, is letting these guys have a reason to play this mode and not force them to pay to win. And I get a lot of people are going to say you don't have to pay, you can do this for free, but not everybody has all day every day to hop in MyFaction to grind. It takes hours upon hours to grind in Faction Wars, and unfortunately most people just don't have that time on a video game. One thing that I did really love about MyFaction this year is they are incorporating new match types. So that is huge to me, because last year the match types got really tired, really old, really fast. Thankfully, the ladder match has a whole new feel this year with a new mini game, a couple of new things that you can do within the ladder match. So maybe that match type won't feel as tired, but there are other match types also coming to MyFaction within WWE 2K25. So let me know in the comments what you guys think of MyFaction going into WWE 2K25. Do you still hate it? Are you ready to play it? Are you excited for the new features? And are you hoping to get some Persona cards? If you like this video, do me a favor, leave a subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.